has been an advisor to Jarrett on this project, and we're so excited today to have Jarrett Ciesch's final master's project presentation. So as many of you know, the master's project is the final component of the master's degree program, so we really look forward to seeing all of these presentations, and we're glad that we can kick off all of these presentations with Jarrett's presentation tonight. So I want to go over a couple of really quick rules for using this WebEx platform for the meeting tonight. We ask that all of you guys who are signed on, that you turn off your microphones and your videos. So can everyone go ahead and do that? Everybody, there is a little icon with a microphone. Does everybody have theirs turned off? Okay. Yeah, I don't see any videos on, which is good. We'll just have Jarrett on. I hear sound coming from somebody. That's everybody okay. So everybody has their sound off except for Jarrett. Okay, looks good. And so the way that the presentations are going to work is you can see Jarrett's window in the upper right part of the screen. That's where he's actually presenting this live. And then the main screen, you can see his PowerPoint presentation. If you see on the bottom right, you can see a chat window. So if you have any questions during the presentation or at the end of the presentation, we ask that you send a private chat to either me, Michael Levingood, or to Iris Patton. So please don't send a question to everyone. Just send to either me, Michael, or Iris, and we will moderate those questions at the end of the presentation. So 15 minutes for Jarrett's presentation, and then 5 minutes for questions at the end. Okay, these presentations will be recorded and then will be posted to the YouTube channel. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce Jarrett Cziesch, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Take it from here, Jarrett.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, like Michael said, my name is Jarrett Cziesch. My project is a non-point source identification strategy, otherwise known as NEXUS for short. It's a basic introduction to the process itself, though I will go over some of the more detailed issues regarding the process itself. A little bit about my background. I have experience in education in water quality, hydrology, environmental sciences, and information systems related to environmental applications and studies. And the reason why I chose to do this model is simply based upon my background and interest in the process itself. Sorry about that. I had to click through a slide for a second there. The agenda itself, we're going to go over the background, the introduction, purpose, methods, results, and a short conclusion. The reason why I decided to go to the background first is because this will give you a basic idea of the origin of the NEXUS model itself, and why I chose to use this project. Three main ideas behind the origin of the NEXUS model. Basic idea, of course, is non-point sources on water pollution, which gives me the idea of the model itself. It's the purpose of the model. And the second point would be, of course, the research, which provides the platform and the tools for the model, which allows me to identify sources of non-point sources of water pollution. And the third would be the integration of established data and methods. And most of you may be familiar with these, such as the OASIS and the Universal Soil Classification, which speaks for itself, and some of the data sets from known repositories from federal agencies and bureaus. A little bit about background on non-point sources of water pollution. Some of you may be familiar with this. So, pretty straightforward concept. Point sources come from areas, of course, like outlets and pipes. And non-point sources are sources of pollution that come from areas such as croplands, developed areas. This, of course, comes from precipitation and runoff that carries pollutants from these areas. Now, a little bit more about the types of non-point source water pollution that I've attempted to incorporate in this model. Does a pretty good job. Of course, the fertilizers, oils, sediments, and nutrients eventually. I'm sorry, I think I'm getting some feedback on the microphone. Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Continue.
Okay, I'll continue. And going over the Lucis model itself, some of you, again, may be familiar with this. The raster model used for identifying land use conflicts and preferences for major stakeholders. The concept behind the Lucis model comes from an article written by UGP Odom from the University of Florida. In his article, he comes with a conceptual idea called the compartment model. And this is the basic foundation for the process itself. And of course, the Lucis model adopts the analytical hierarchical process, which is a survey method used for ranking and weighting elements within the model itself. The six-step process, it's a basic six-step process which is standardized, which allows developers to identify these areas. And of course, the information from this is useful for just about everybody with an interest in land use. The established data methods, this is an extremely important factor with regards to my model. And a lot of these factors have different definitions depending on who you are, meaning, of course, if your data, the definition of data and the feasibility can be defined differently for a developer than it can be for the general public. And so all of these concepts and ideas play a key role in collecting all the data used from the model. Two of the last key factors, standardization potential and determinants, tabular and spatial data. These 2 points are derived from the EPA metrics geodatabase tables, which I will discuss shortly. Some key points about the NIPSIS model. It's very similar to the Lucis model. Of course, the second statement, it's the Lucis model at its core, and this is because it uses the platform methods to identify non-point sources of water pollution, much like Lucis does for land use preference. It uses standard data sources and data, and of course the baseline data requirements I just discussed in the previous slide. A six-step process, identical to the Lucis method, although of course the outcome of each process has been slightly tweaked. The integration of a basic universal solid loss equation, which I termed the simple NIPSIS universal solid loss equation, which is used as a carrier underlying values for the raster data sets for each NPC. And of course, another important factor is the boundaries themselves, which are adhered to, which are strictly adhered to the SIP. And this is, of course, due to scale constraints. And of course, the information that comes from these boundaries are a lot more useful in this format than some of these larger watersheds use. And just like Lucis, this information is useful for a wide variety of audiences. Just going over the conceptual foundation of the model itself, we have the 3 non-point categories that I use for the model. First, of course, is the agricultural NPC. This includes erosion, crops, grazing, irrigation, and of course the geodatabase from the EPA. Domestic. This includes erosion as well. Population density, development. Development is weighted according to suburban, rural, heavy, industrial. Transportation, mining, I included active. Because they're active, I decided to include them in the domestic non-point category. And of course, the EPA metrics. The last non-point category is natural background non-point sources. Again, erosion, land cover. It's a little deceiving because this includes things such as physical weathering, chemical weathering, and general precipitation over a 20-year period. Climate, same. Mining, non-active. This is an extremely important element for this watershed, given the history of mining within it. And of course, the EPA metrics, which is a staple component to each non-point category. The purpose behind all this is pretty straightforward. It's just an identification tool used for, of course, identifying non-point sources for water pollution. And it's taken from accepted concepts that are already used today for other methods. And instead of reinventing the wheel, I decided to use what was already out there and put those tools to use in another format. Going over the methods, this again is part of the, this comes from the nuisance process. And the methods themselves are almost identical. Of course, the outcome is different. The definition of the study area goals, of course, inventorying your data, analyzing the data, combining the elements, creating each non-point category data set, normalizing them, and then identifying each non-point source using the final raster data set. Going over the study area, this is pretty straightforward again. This is the example SRP study area that I chose. Given that I'm familiar with the area, I decided to use this. It's a large watershed, it's a fairly large watershed, and the flow, directional flow runs from north to south, and it's cut in half by upper and lower portions. And more information about this watershed can be found on my SRP. This will give you a basic idea of going over the terrain and the study area itself. As you can see in the distance, the aquifer area cuts through some of the geologic formations that you see in the distance. And this, of course, is looking east at a higher elevation. And this is in the Bradshaw Mountains. This area is known to have some historic mining issues and erosion problems caused by that. The second step in the methods, of course, is inventory data resources. Again, these data sets are all primary data sets described in the SFP. These are all required. And each data set, of course, is put into a folder named accordingly to the non-point category. And this is just to give you a basic understanding of the data that's used. As far as the simple nexus versus soil elasticity model, this is a key element in each non-point category. The tabular data that I used is from NOAA. This is a basic Excel spreadsheet that has to be converted to an XY event. And it's pretty straightforward once you correct the format. And the third step is, of course, analyzing the secondary data. Secondary data can be optional depending on the developer's needs, stakeholders' needs, and, of course, the objectives of the model itself. Everything is weighted according to the scale that you see at the right. And each element is given a scale according to the intensity of importance, of course, this is seen here. And this has also been derived from today's AHP process. Moving on to the normalized non-point category data sets, here we have the agriculture MTC. And as you can see, this data set is much more binary in nature, given the fact that, a lot of the boundaries that have been set in place are, of course, they're pretty stark. So you're going to see that a lot of the agriculture non-point category data sets, given the fact that, given the boundaries. when the data is not continuous in nature. And I'm moving on to domestic. And what's pretty apparent here is, of course, in the lower watersheds, you have most of the development and following the middle of the watershed. This is all main highway up into other rural areas and developed areas. The natural null point category, this is much more continuous data set. And it's pretty evident in its appearance. And the highest potential, in fact, potential null point sources is, of course, going to be coming from this area shaded in blue. And the reason for that is, of course, because of the non-active mining in the area. So here we go for the normalizing more and compressing the data sets down to the range of the elements that you see here. This basically normalizes the data set and further going to a high, medium, and low impact as far as the non-point source itself. Here we have the agriculture and non-point category, the domestic, and the natural. And the 6-step process is, of course, combining each normalized and compressed data set and coming up with the final mixed system model itself. This, of course, includes calculating total areas, identifying, So here we go to the results and the deliverables. So then my final map for my agriculture non-point category. You can see the total areas are low, medium, and high impact. And of course, this can be the total percentage area of the MPC can be quite deceiving because, of course, natural background sources versus domestic non-point sources in agriculture are going to have different and varying degrees of impact depending on the concentration and the load that they possess, which is a completely different detail in itself. We go with the domestic. And again, you note the total percentage of high impact value, 2.9%. This is, of course, deceiving because domestic non-point source runoff is quite expensive. We go with the natural non-point category. Defining that. And the ranking. This explains the legend data here. And its place value, and of course the weight. And this is my table data for the previous final raster data set that we've just seen. And this is organizing according to low, medium, and high impacts. In conclusion, my model is a useful tool. It's definitely useful for identifying non-point sources. You can use it as a screening tool and to further justify any complex modeling, such as with SWOT and other different proprietary models. And of course, it can be used as a kind of model itself, used for source allocations and public outreach. And if you're interested in just looking at this even more, I do have a link to the SOP. And that's it. Any questions?
Thanks, Jarrett.
No problem.
So let's all give him a round of applause. You don't have to turn on your mic, but okay. So now we're opening this up for questions. If you have any questions, please send Iris or me a private chat. Okay, Jarrett, I have a question for you while we're waiting to see if anybody else has questions.
Sure.
I was wondering, could you tell me a little bit more about what the next step would be? Like who could use this data and what they might do with that
Sure.
to make decisions?
Sure. Well, as a decision support tool, this would be quite useful for budgetary allocations. For example, for specific stormwater policies, public outreach is a huge component, and they're mandated according to law to require educational sources to the public. And this of course is highly useful as a visualization aid to bring to seminars and the public outreach events in order to educate the public about stormwater and water quality issues. And of course, it's a stepping tool that can be used for additional screening. A lot of the other point source models out there are extremely complex and they require a lot of desktop time to get to learn. And by doing this, it sort of simplifies all that and it compartmentalizes every non-point source that you can think of. And again, most of the proprietary models out there are specific to key constituents such as total nitrogen, phosphorus, things of that nature. So it's very difficult to find an all-encompassing model. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Any other questions from anybody else? Remember, you can send me or Iris a private message with your question, and I can ask it to Jarrett.
One thing I was asked about was the watershed modeling process. There's just a couple of steps in there that I wanted to discuss. I might as well take the time to do it. As far as the spline method that was used, this of course is going to be discussed in the SOP itself. But the method that I used to gather the rain gauge data is pretty contributing. It covers the entire watershed, and it doesn't discriminate, using discrete boundary lines or things like that. I just wanted to kind of touch base on that. The universal soil loss equation that I used itself is sort of the underlying factor, the carrying weight factor for the rest of the data sets. And you can see here in the last slide how some of the erosion model has affected, brought through some of the weighted values of the data sets.
I have another question for you.
Sure.
If you were to do this again, what improvements would you make to the model?
That's a great question. That's already going through my head. Some of the, I do employ the AHP process, although I do ask that participants rank each element during what the NUSIS calls during the SUA phase. For me, it would just simply be the initial modeling phase. And that I've asked participants to rank soils loss or erosion as an element factor for the model itself. That I would just leave up to the developer, or actually the SOP, and rank that using the ordinal rank system all the way up to 9. Because there's some subjectivity to soils loss equation modeling, I would rather let the data do the talking than the expertise, so to speak. So, during for example, my survey, the ranking that I was given for my soils loss element was a ranking of 7. And it really sort of discriminates against those areas that have higher sources. It sort of, it cuts off the statistics, so to speak.
Okay, thanks. So we are just about out of time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and let's give Jarrett another round of applause, virtual round of applause. And we look forward to seeing you all again for the next round of presentations, which are next Thursday at, I believe, 10:30 Arizona time. So I hope to see everyone then. So thanks for joining us. Have a nice night.
Thank you.